Once I woke up in the middle of the night and saw a silhouette of a person hovering around the edge of my bed. I pinched myself and rubbed my eyes to make sure I was fully awake. Still there. The shadow didn't move, just stood there, watching. My heart raced, but I didn't want to scream and wake up my parents. So, I just pulled the covers over my head and tried to go back to sleep. In the morning, I convinced myself it was just a bad dream. But then, strange things started happening. One night, I was lying in bed when I heard a soft rustling noise coming from the kitchen. My parents were asleep, and I knew we didn't have any visitors. I got up and tiptoed to the kitchen. As I got closer, the sound stopped. The kitchen was dark and empty, but I felt a cold draft, like someone had just been there. A few nights later, I heard the sound again, this time louder. It was like someone was rummaging through the drawers. My heart pounded as I tiptoed back to the kitchen. Again, it was empty. I checked the windows, all shut and locked. I was starting to feel paranoid. One afternoon, my parents went out, and I was home alone with our dog, Max. I was doing my homework when Max started barking furiously. He ran to the hallway and stood there, barking at something I couldn't see. I tried to calm him down, but he wouldn't stop. He was staring intently at a corner of the hallway, his eyes following something that seemed to move. I felt a chill run down my spine. I heard a window open. I rushed to check, but every window was shut and locked, just like before. I was sure I had heard it. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. I called my parents, and they came home early. They didn't believe me, said I was imagining things. But the noises continued. Almost every night, I heard someone moving around in the kitchen. Sometimes it was soft footsteps, other times it was the sound of drawers being opened and closed. Max would bark at nothing, his eyes tracking invisible movements. I started to dread the nights, lying in bed with the covers pulled over my head, hoping the noises would stop. One night, I woke up again to the silhouette at the edge of my bed. This time, it was closer. I could see the outline of a face, eyes staring right at me. I froze, too scared to move or even breathe. The figure leaned in closer, and I could feel its cold breath on my face. Then it whispered, "Leave." I bolted upright, gasping for air. The figure was gone, but the room felt colder. I ran to my parents' room, trembling. They told me it was just a nightmare, but I knew it was real. From that night on, the noises in the kitchen stopped, and Max stopped barking at invisible things. But every now and then, I still feel the cold breath on my face, and I know the shadow is still there, watching, waiting. I was almost kidnapped as a child. One day when I was 8 years old, I was playing in our backyard. The sun was shining, and I was enjoying my time outside, jumping rope and playing with my toys. It was a normal, peaceful afternoon. As I was walking towards our side door in the backyard, I noticed an old man around 60 years old on the other side of our fence. He had gray hair and wore a dirty, old coat. At first, I thought he was just a neighbor passing by, but then he stopped and looked at me. He started walking alongside me, with the fence between us. In a low, raspy voice, he whispered, "Little girl, come here. I want to show you something. Don't be scared. Come here." My heart began to race. I knew I shouldn't talk to strangers, but I was frozen with fear. The man kept whispering, and his eyes seemed to bore into mine. I noticed he was slowly moving towards the front yard, where our gate was. Our gate couldn't lock. He kept saying, "Come here. It's okay. I have something for you." My instincts kicked in. I turned and ran as fast as I could towards the side door. I could hear the man's footsteps quicken as he tried to reach the gate. My hands were shaking, but I managed to open the door and slip inside. I slammed the door shut and locked it, my heart pounding in my chest. I quickly closed the curtains and peeked outside. The old man was at the gate now, fiddling with it, trying to open it. I knew he would be in our backyard in seconds. I ran upstairs as fast as my legs could carry me, shouting for my dad. "Dad! Dad! There's a man outside trying to get in." My dad rushed down the stairs, his face serious. He grabbed a baseball bat from the closet and ran towards the backyard. I followed him, my heart still racing. When we got to the backyard, the old man was gone. The gate was slightly ajar, swinging in the breeze. We called the police, and they came to check the area, but they couldn't find the old man. They told us to be careful and keep the doors and windows locked. My parents were shaken, and for days, they kept a close eye on me, never letting me out of their sight. Even now, years later, I can still remember the man's voice and the look in his eyes. I never found out who he was or what he wanted, but I will never forget how close I came to being taken. I am always careful, always looking over my shoulder, because you never know when danger might be lurking just around the corner. When I was about 6 years old, I was walking home from my friend's house after dark. She lived right around the corner from us, so it wasn't very far. Our yard was pretty big, and I was hurrying across it because I was late to dinner. The night was quiet, and the only light came from the street lamp at the corner. As I was halfway across the yard, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, in the middle of the yard, was a black mist. It swirled and moved like smoke, but it was thick and dark. In the mist, I could see the outline of a man. He was tall, wearing a hat that cast a shadow over his face. I froze for a moment, too scared to move. The man in the mist turned his head towards me, and I could feel his eyes on me even though I couldn't see them. My heart pounded, and I knew I had to get away. I ran faster than I ever had in my life, my feet barely touching the ground. As I ran, I heard something that made my skin crawl. It was a low, chilling laugh, coming from the mist man. It followed me, echoing in my ears. I burst through the front door, gasping for breath, and slammed it shut behind me. I told my parents what I saw, my voice trembling. My dad looked concerned but tried to reassure me. He grabbed a flashlight and went outside to look. I watched from the window as he searched the yard, shining the light into every corner. He came back inside, shaking his head. "There's nothing out there, sweetheart. It's probably just your imagination," he said, though I could see he was a bit shaken too. Years later, when I was a teenager, I watched the movie Poltergeist with some friends. As we watched, the creepy preacher guy came on the screen. He had a sinister smile and a dark aura that made my stomach turn. Suddenly, I remembered the mist man from my yard. The preacher reminded me so much of him that I felt a chill run down my spine. To this day, even as a grown-ass woman, remembering that night creeps me out. I never saw the mist man again, but sometimes, when I'm alone in the dark, I think about him. I wonder if he's still out there, watching and waiting, hidden in the shadows. The memory of his laugh still haunts me, a reminder of a night I will never forget. Once when I was about 15 years old, my mom had gone into a store while I waited in the car. It was dark outside, and the parking lot was mostly empty. Our dog, Max, was sitting in the back seat with me, keeping me company. I was playing on my phone when I noticed a man walking toward the car. He was dressed in dark clothes, and something about him made me uneasy. My heart started to race, and without thinking, I quickly locked all the doors. The man reached the car and started knocking on the window. His face was hidden in the shadows, but I could see his eyes looking right at me. I felt a chill run down my spine. Max began barking wildly, sensing the danger. The man didn't go away. He tried opening the door, pulling on the handle forcefully. My heart pounded harder as he moved around the car, trying each door. When he got to my side, he leaned close to the window and tried to open it. His face was now just inches away from mine, separated only by the glass. I could see his twisted smile, and it terrified me. Max was barking louder than ever, his teeth bared, ready to protect me. I knew I had to do something fast. With shaking hands, I pressed down on the car horn. The loud blaring sound filled the night, echoing through the empty parking lot. The man's smile disappeared, replaced by a look of anger. But then, he took off. He ran into the darkness, disappearing between the parked cars. My heart was still racing, but I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Max kept barking, his eyes fixed on where the man had vanished. Moments later, my mom came out of the store, looking worried. I told her what happened, my voice trembling. She hugged me tight, and we drove home, making sure the doors were locked and the windows rolled up. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what happened. I kept wondering what would have happened if I hadn't locked the doors. Would the man have tried to hurt me? Kidnap me? The thought sent shivers down my spine. Even now, years later, I always make sure to lock the doors when I'm in the car alone. I never forget that night, and I'm always thankful for Max being there with me. The memory of the man's face and his attempts to get into the car still haunts me, a reminder to always stay vigilant and trust my instincts.